Hello everyone. We are slowly coming to the end of this 7th chapter, and in this last part devoted to texts and color, we will see how we can add borders to our elements, and also, how to play with the transparency of these. Well, let's start with the borders. We can put a border to all types of element, be it text, images, or frames. You just have to know that for text, the border will frame the text area, and not the characters themselves. Well, let's see the different functions to add and define our borders. First, there are all the unique properties, which allow us to define for each of them a specific function. They are border width, which defines the thickness of the border. Border color, which allows you to define its color. And border style, which defines its style. That would be a lot of functions to add to completely define a border. But, as with the background, there is a super property that will allow us to define our border in a single function. This super property is border, quite simply. It will contain 3 values, which in order, will allow us to define its width, or its thickness. It will be indicated in pixels. Its color is the main color of your border, and we will define it like all colors, either in color name, or in hexadecimal, or in RGB. And thirdly, we will define its type. There are 8 possible border types, defined by name. Here are the different types. None, there is no border, this is the default, and remember inheritance, as with the background and all functions. Solid, this is a single line. Dotted, for a dotted line. Dashed, for a dashed line. Double, 2 strokes side by side. And relief effects, groove and ridge, which gives a border in relief effect, and the same inverted effect. And inset and outset, which give the effect that the element is either sunken or raised. We are going to do a test, to see this on text, and on a frame, in this case, our banner. Let's open our editor. We are simply going to add an H2 level title after the banner, so in the HTML code, like this. Then, in the CSS, we add this tag, so, H2, and we give it 2 functions, color, yes, by default the text is black, and therefore on our black background it would be invisible, so, I give the value, white to this function. And I add the function, border, with the value, 2px for its thickness, silver for its color, and dashed, for a border in the form of dashes. Well, let's also add the function, border for our banner, either for header, and we'll give it the size of 10 pixels, the color, blue, and the style, groove. Let's save both files, and see the result in our browser. Well, for the banner it's fine, the border surrounds it perfectly, but, for the text, wouldn't there be like a little problem? Indeed, the border frames the text well, but over the entire width of the page, and not just our title. This is normal. Text type tags, like P or H, cause a line break at their end, but they cover the entire width of their areas. Here, the area is not defined expressly, and therefore, it is the area of the frame where they are that prevails, that is, the body, which covers the entire width of the page. If we want to frame just our text, we will have to define its own area. We will see this later, when defining frames. For the moment, let us return to our borders. Good, so we can frame our elements, but that's not all. We can also separately define each edge of it. To do this, we can use the properties, border top, to define only the top border. Border bottom, for the bottom one. Border left, for the one on the left. And border right for the right one. You are not obliged to use all the functions, only those declared will be effective, and therefore, you can, for example, put only a border below, in dotted lines, which would give the effect of a separation of text. As for the border function, there are also all the detailed functions for each side, such as border top color, which allows to define only the color of the upper border. If we use the function border with its 3 values, we can complete it, for example, with the 3 functions border bottom color, border left color, and border right color, to define a specific color for each side, like in this example, where I'm going to define the complete border, and I'm going to use 4 different colors for each side. Here is the result. As you can see, this gives us a very wide choice of variants for our borders, and in this case, the top border is yellow, as defined in the function border, and the other 3 in each of the colors defined with the functions border, bottom left and right color. But that's not all. With CSS3 came a function eagerly awaited by all site designers. It is the function to round off the corners of our borders. Note also that this function will also work if there is no border, but will only be visible if the frame it targets is of a different color from the global background where it is located. Do not panic, you will understand with the following examples. The function for rounding corners is border radius, which we will define the value in pixels. Well, let's see 2 examples, the first one with a border, and the second without a border, but with a different color background. This also works on all tags types, so we'll modify our banner to have rounded corners. The value is the radius of the quarter circle that the rounding will form. For our banner, I'm going to use a radius of 30 pixels, so I add the function border radius with a value of 30 px to the header tag, like this. And let's see the result in the browser. This is getting much better. So you can already add and define the borders of your banner to your liking. We can also specify the size of the rounding for each corner, and to do this, we will simply indicate their 4 values for the border radius function, like this, and in order: top left, top right, and bottom left. Just a small note, check that the total of the radius of the rounding on each of the sides does not exceed the length of these, such as, for example, the top right value plus the value bottom right must not exceed the height of your frame. Finally, a last possibility to define your angles is to define an elliptical rounding. To do this, we will give 2 values to the function border radius, separated by a slark. These 2 values are in order: the horizontal size of the round and its vertical size. Here are 2 examples to show you the possibility of creating a round or elliptical inset with the border radius function. The first one, our inset is originally square, and I just added the value of its half size as a radius for the border. And the second is of rectangular origin, for which I put the values for an elliptical rounding: first, the half width, the slark, and second, the half height. As you can see, this will allow us to create our site really to our liking, and according to all our desires. Well, now let's see the last part of this chapter: how to give transparency to our elements. There are 2 possibilities. With the function opacity, which works on all elements, but beware, it defines the total transparency of your element, whether it is text, its background, if it is defined, images, background and borders. This function can take a value from 0 to 1. At 0, the element will be totally transparent, and therefore invisible. At 1, totally opaque, and for all values between 0 and 1, more or less transparent. For example, at 0.6, the element will be 40% transparent or 60% opaque, since we define its opacity. If I take the example with our page title surrounded by a 4-color border, and add the function opacity to it, with a value of 0.75, this is what it would look like in our browser. I intentionally doubled the title, without the opacity feature, so you can see the difference between with and without opacity. There is a second way to set the opacity of an element, and this is more precise, as it will allow you to set each part separately. To do this, we will use the color value, defined in RGBA. Yes, it's the same principle as for a value defined in RGB, to which we add a fourth value, which is the alpha channel, or the level of transparency of the color. It is defined exactly as for the function opacity, therefore, at 0, totally transparent, and at 1, totally opaque, with the level of transparency variable between these two values. So, to add a transparency effect to any element colors, just replace its color definition by RGBA with the 3 values defining the color, and in fourth value, the opacity level. So I'm going to take my example again, and I'm just going to put the text in semi-transparent, removing the function opacity, and modifying the name of the color by its RGB value, that is, 255,255,255 for white, to which I add the alpha channel to 0.5, like this. Here is the result obtained. As you can see, we can then modify the transparency of an element for each of the parts that compose it, and for which we indicate a specific color, simply by using the notation in RGBA. So, we are coming to the end of this chapter dedicated to texts and color. You will see that there are still other possibilities to modify the appearance of the elements. In the next chapter, we will focus on images. Also a very important element of our site, because what would a site be without images? Thank you for your attention. Katerina and Patrick.